Week 7 NFL preview on the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast. Hey, everybody. It's October 17th, 2024. I am Aaron Schatz from FTN Fantasy. He is Mike Tanier from the Two Deep Zone Substack at miketanier.substack.com. We are here to talk about Week 7 in the NFL. Now, I know it says Thursday Night Football. Where? I'm sorry, we're not going to talk about Thursday Night Football.
Is it on the screen somewhere?
Yeah, it's apparently in the title in YouTube. It'll say It says Thursday Night Football, but we're not going to talk about the Broncos and the Saints. I'm afraid. So. We apologize for
Sean Payton's homecoming.
It's the Sean Payton homecoming. Bo Nix versus Spencer Rattler, big rookie battle.
Nix Rattler Nix.
Not as exciting as next week's battle between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams.
Not quite. It's like 2000 Oklahoma against Auburn. That's what it sounds
like.
Bub
Means will be the number one receiver for the Saints tonight.
Bub. Is Shaheed hurt too?
Shaheed is probably going on IR.
Oh my God,
He has a knee injury.
The wagers are going to be so.
Olave has a concussion, and Patrick Surtain is out with a concussion. So
I'm playing the punt waiver. I'm going to find the punt wager, and I'm playing the punt over tonight. That's what I'm doing. Rooting for punts.
Podcast live stream here. We are brought to you, of course, by Underdog Fantasy. The NFL season is underway, and there's no better way to enjoy the game than Underdog Fantasy. It is the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing app in the fantasy sports industry. Underdog offers a new customer FTN special with up to $1,000 matched on your first-time deposit. The Underdog app is easy to use. All their weekly contests are there, like the 2-minute drill, the onside kick, and the double doink. Head over to Underdog for a deposit match up to $1,000 when you sign up with code FTN. That is up to $1,000 extra. NFL season is here, and who better to celebrate with than Underdog Fantasy? And, of course, we'll take your questions and comments on Week 7 games. It's a really great slate this week. Only 2 teams on bye. And 4 different games that match 2 teams in the top 10 of DVOA so far this year. One of which is on Monday night, so we will not be discussing that tonight. But 3 of which are on Sunday, and that starts with the DVOA Bowl, the biggest game of the day on Sunday, even bigger than the Super Bowl rematch, I think, because I love DVOA. Vikings and Lions at 1 p.m. It's not really bigger than the Super Bowl rematch. The Super Bowl rematch is being broadcast nationwide.
The Super Bowl rematch is going to be a great game between, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, between a team that's going to win its division no matter what, and a team that's going to pull away from its division no matter what. Let's face it, the 49ers. This is a balance of power, win the division, have pole position, make the playoffs, be in that Super Bowl conversation game. Doesn't matter who wins or loses the other one that much. This one has huge implications.
And it's really interesting if you look at the pass run splits for these teams. The Vikings are only 20th running the ball, and Aaron Jones did not practice Wednesday with hip and hamstring injuries. So the Lions' defense has been stellar against the run this year. Their offense has been good against the run. The offense has been great running the ball this year. I don't know if the Vikings are going to be able to run the ball.
Yeah, they're facing a tough defense. I mean, most of what we've been talking about all week with the Lions has been Aiden Hutchinson and what it does for the pass rush. That's going to
I mean, look, you can't change the fact that they don't have a good depth. They do not have good depth at this position. They lost Davenport. They lost Comiskey.
Yep.
Now they've lost by far their best guy, which is Hutchinson.
Right. They've doghoused Houston for all eternity, and he's probably been doghoused on merit. The kid who had a couple sacks a few years back.
Yeah, he's like a Bryce Huff. He can't stop the run.
He's like a Bryce Huff, but like can also jumps off sides a lot for extra value.
So, yeah, the Lions' defense is hurting, not against the run, but against the pass, which is, I mean, they're not going to be able to bring a lot of pressure. Here's some interesting pressure stats. You know that the Vikings love to blitz,
yes,
right? They're only 15th in the ESPN pass rush win rate, but, of course, they get lots of pressure because they blitz. Jared Goff has a 52% DVOA against the blitz this year, best in the NFL.
Really?
That comes from Stats Hub. For your subscribers on FTN Fantasy Stats Hub, you can now get DVOA against the blitz during the season. And yeah, the number one quarterback against the blitz this year is Jared Goff.
Remarkable.
Well, that is a great offensive line.
Great offensive line, I think, is helping. They have a screen game that is probably contributing to that a little bit. One stat I pulled up, when the Vikings do get pressure, and they lead the league in pressures by most people that count pressures, quarterback rating against them is 38.0. Obviously, 20 sacks off of pressure, 4 interceptions off of pressure. They allow 3.7 yards per attempt. So you can talk about the win rate or, how often they get home. Those pressures are also causing chaos for the quarterback. They're causing, obviously, you see these Van Ginkel picks.
So a lot of this game is, can the Lions pick up the Vikings blitzes? Right. Which is, as great as their offensive line is going to depend a lot on tight ends and running backs to help pick up the blitz.
And also finding out where these blitzers come from. It's not man-on-man winning. It's, he dropped out. This guy's coming in. How do I adjust? One of the solutions I suggested for that on the two-deep zone today is they should be thinking of running in non-running situations. The Lions have a great running game. I know third and medium, you think of that like that's not a good running down. You like 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. Consider running the ball because you could catch Flores trying to drop his lineman out and bring safeties in and things like that. Have confusion on their end and make them think twice on future 3rd and mediums if you can gash them against the run. I saw the Lions do that a couple of times against the Cardinals. I think they did it against some other teams. It's one tactic they should consider.
Hitchhiker's Pie points out that Goff has a relatively low volume in against the blitz, which helps when you have a swingy stat with a low sample size, and that is true. Mm-hmm. Here's another interesting stat from the Stats Hub. The Lions play a lot more man coverage than the Vikings do. The best DVOA against man coverage this year at 72% is Sam Darnold.
Wow.
Now that is a swingy stat too with a small sample size. Mm-hmm. And the number 2 quarterback against man coverage this year is Jared Goff. But again, the Vikings play a lot more zone behind their blitzes, whereas the Lions like to play a lot of man, and they probably want to not play so much man. I mean, I don't think that's a Sam Darnold stat as much as it is like a Justin Jefferson stat.
It's a Justin Jefferson winning stat, I think, in a lot of ways. A couple of thoughts here. TJ Hawkinson might play. He is back.
Really? Are we almost back to TJ? That's really nice for my Scott Fishbowl team.
That's new. It might not be this week, but it's coming, and he's not out for this week. Carlton Davis, cornerback for the Lions in concussion protocol, did not practice yesterday. That would be the guy who would cover Justin Jefferson ideally.
Although I will point out it's another swingy stat. I talk a lot about how cornerback stats are very inconsistent, but I did my cornerback coverage DVOA through 6 weeks, and Carlton Davis did not come out very good.
Okay.
You know who did come out shockingly good?
Please don't say Terry and Arnold.
He has a shockingly strong opponent adjustment for who he's had to cover.
Okay.
Stephon Gilmore.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Terry and Arnold.
No, Stephon Gilmore, who I thought, he's a veteran. He's older. He's not as good as he used to be. He came out top 10 because the opponent adjustment is so strong for who he's had to cover. One game I remember in particular, he covered Garrett Wilson all game, right? So, right. He's had to cover tough receivers on good offense. The Vikings have played a tough schedule so far, despite being undefeated. Both undefeated teams have played tough schedules.
Yes.
And, they're not undefeated off weak schedules. And Gilmore has played very well if you consider who he's covered this year.
And he's a veteran who can find a way sometimes. And again, he got targeted a lot when it was Garrett Wilson. But if Davis can't go, Terry and Arnold, rookie, human defensive pass interference penalty right now. That could be a real problem if he's forced to go over and cover Justin Jefferson.
The line is Vikings -2.5.
Hit it!
And the system says no pick.
Really?
Yes. I mean, I penalized the Lions a little bit for the Hutchinson injury, using Dave, right? The Lions had stronger priors than the Vikings do. The Vikings are a little bit better this year. The Lions have a little bit better prior. It ends up with no pick on Vikings -2.5. So this is a really good close game, I think.
And I think it could be close. I'd need about 4 or 5 points to take the Lions right now because of the injury situation. It's like you said, and we talked about it on Monday. It's not just, well, you lost your best pass rusher. You lost your best pass rusher. Your number 2 guy has been long gone, and there's no one else there to pick up the slack. I don't see how that translates into a path for victory this week. If they get another guy, if they show me something, right now I'm hitting the Vikings -2.5.
The bet I like on this one is under 49.5, which I believe is now 50.5.
Yes. Vikings are 1-4 against the over this year, going over. And the Lions games are 2-3. These teams are not hitting the overs.
Yeah, I mean, these are strong defenses. Yes, Hutchinson's out, but the Vikings defense is very strong, and they'll somewhat keep the Lions offense down, I think.
Agreed. I would play this under all the way.
All right, another good 1:00 game is the Texans at the Packers. That's the number 6 DVOA Texans 5-1 and the number 8 DVOA Packers 4-2. And this is another game where one of the teams has really struggled rushing this year, and that's the Texans, although Joe Mixon should be back this game. So hopefully that would mean that their running game gets better.
Yeah, you saw him run for 100 yards last week. He is still limited. He's not practicing much, but he's going to be out there. Looks like the offensive line improved. Rivers McCown wrote a thing about the on Substack about the Texans' offensive line and its improvements, and a mixed bag in terms of improvements. They're not jumping off sides every other play. That's the good news.
Yeah, the Packers' pass rush is not very good in the ESPN win rates. So the fact that the Texans' offensive line is not very good in the pass blocking win rates is like it sort of cancels each other out.
Yeah, the Packers are once again. It's Preston Smith and like their interior guys. That's sort of their pass rush. I think their leading pass rusher has 1.5 sacks.
Lucas Van Ness has not really matured, I think, into the player that, when you take a guy in the first round, you think that he's going to become. Not that he's not going to in the future, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I liked him in college, but you're right. We've seen nothing from him. They've got a problem. Devontae Wyatt out Wednesday's practice with an ankle injury. So was his backup, Kobe Wooden. Is that the young man's name? So they're down to only 3 healthy bodies right now on the interior line for the Green Bay Packers. The best ways to get a pressure on the Texans has been up the middle because they've been having problems at guard, have an inexperienced center. And as Rivers pointed out, Rivers, if you're listening, you were talking about the stunts and the twists that we're working on the inside against the Texans. You need guys to do that. The Packers are running out of guys.
I'll also point out the Packers defense has benched Eric Stokes, the former first-round pick who was starting the first few weeks, and the coverage DVOA says, good idea. He has really struggled. The other 2 guys, Jair Alexander and the controversial Keyshawn Nixon, have been very good, but Stokes has been very bad.
Did you find the Keyshawn?
I have not found the magical Keyshawn. Yeah, Packers fans, whenever I post these coverage DVOAs, are like, I can't trust your stat because Nixon is terrible. And then I'm like, tell me the plays. Tell me the plays I need to be looking at where Nixon looks terrible, and no one can give me the plays.
I went through every completion of 15-plus yards against the Packers this year. I went through all of them because you were talking about that. We were talking about that on the DVOA Discord. I went through all of them. If the smoking gun is Justin Jefferson out jumping him in the corner of the end zone, guys, that's not a smoking gun.
Right, and I know about Alec Pierce catching a touchdown on him in week 2.
But he's worried about Richardson scrambling right at him, so he kind of gets lost in the middle. Okay, that's a mistake, or you get caught in the bind. I'm not finding it. I've seen Stokes make mistakes. I saw Ballantyne make mistakes. Quay Walker, good Lord. That's all mistakes.
Yeah, Quay Walker doesn't have good. I mean, the linebacker coverage numbers are not as trustworthy, especially after only 6 weeks. But yeah, he doesn't have good numbers.
No. He's a runaround guy. But Stokes. Nixon is a slotty corner who does slotty corner things, and
who's now playing outside because of benching Stokes. But
yeah. But early in the year he was that, and he was fine. He seemed like a typical guy or a half decent guy at that. Good blitz.
The line is Packers -2.5.
I have so little feel of the Texans right now that I just don't know. What's the system?
I feel Texans. I would pick Texans. Because I feel the Texans are 17th on offense right now.
Okay.
I mean, come on. do you expect that to be the way it is at the end of the season? Like, even with Nico Collins out, do you feel like the Houston Texans are the 17th best offense in the league with C.J. Stroud at quarterback and Tank Dell? And no, I mean, Stephon Diggs, no. Right. So I like the Texans plus 2.5 even on the road here.
I struggle a little bit with the urgency, the division between this, where the Texans, like, this is just another Sunday because they're going to win that division. Where if the Packers take a loss while the DVOA Bowl is coming on, they're in deep trouble. So that's one of the things. And the other thing that has been bothering me has been the consistency of the Texans in terms of not being able to run the ball, not being able to avoid penalties. So I'm very torn at this one. I'd probably lean the way you're leaning, but I'm probably not going to play it.
Camden Caps believes that Bobby Slowick sucks. I don't see a lot of evidence for that. The Houston offense was very, very good last year.
They had 175,000 penalties in the first 4 or 5 weeks. Unless you're saying he didn't prep the guys in terms of motion penalties or something like that. There were games, especially that Vikings game, it was impossible to make sense of what I was watching because it was 3rd and 25 because of 3 false start penalties. So I can't. Bobby Slowick was a head coaching shortlister, entering the season. So I don't know how he suddenly sucks.
We'll take a question from our Russian friend here before the next game. My local book has a weekly special bet for the 3 worst preseason teams to go over their preseason win totals, even money.
No, not for even money.
Should I play even money? Shouldn't that be a plus?
200?
Like a high plus for Carolina, Denver, and New England to go over their bets?
Right. I mean, any one of them should be like a minus 120.
Right. So if you're going to combine all 3 of them, it should be a plus something. So that doesn't seem like a good. And obviously, the Patriots' defense has been much worse than I expected before the season. So them to go over 4.5 does not look good right now.
And the Broncos are at 3-2, so they're going over. They're going to find they can find
Carolina looks lousy, and the Patriots look lousy on defense, which is the surprise, right? We all knew they would look lousy on offense.
Yeah. I mean, I would need plus 250, and then my garbage panda instincts would be, that sounds like fun, and it's a reason to watch these rough games. But not even money. So it's Russian books. I don't know. Don't trust them.
We're not talking about the Cardinals game, but Kyle Woods wants to know, did James Conner practice yesterday? Do you have that on your screen?
I do not have that on the screen, but if you vamp for a second, I will look that up.
Well, I will gab by talking about another game between above-average teams at 1 o'clock, which is the Seahawks at the Falcons, the number 14 Seahawks, who are 3-3, at the number 10 Falcons, who are 4-2. Don't you think 14th is a much more reasonable ranking for the Seahawks? Do you think they're worse than that?
It's a much more 14th is fine. It's much more reasonable than 3rd, which is where we're at 2 weeks ago. They are kind of like the 500 team of 500 teams.
Yeah, a little bit better than 500. I think they're very 14th.
This is hard information to find. I cannot pull it up, I'm afraid. I would say.
All right, we don't know about James Conner. James Conner?
I would have to.
Atlanta, weak against number 1 wide receivers this year, but I could not find a DK Metcalf prop. I don't know why.
Probably because he's on the phone with the offensive coordinator complaining about his role, which was something that happened this week.
Small sample size, but Geno Smith has struggled on deep passes this year, where Kirk Cousins has been awesome.
Interesting. I hate to say this, but I kind of enjoy watching the Falcons right now. They spread the ball around really well. They run it. It's a diverse running game where they do a lot of things. They get both Bijan and Algier involved without it being weird in terms of the split. They get the ball to Ray McLeod. They found ways to use Pitts. I mean, Pitts isn't helping anybody's fantasy team, but he's out there catching balls and being part of things.
Yeah.
They're a fun watch right now.
The Falcons are playing better than I expected. I mean, that should be the tagline for the NFC South. Better than you expected, right?
Better than you expected.
I mean, the Saints aren't anymore, but they were at the start of the season. And right. Carolina is, because Bryce Young isn't playing for them anymore. But Atlanta and Tampa Bay really are better than you expected. Atlanta is 6th in offense so far.
Right. Very balanced, very good. Some problems on the defensive side of the ball for the Seattle Seahawks. We all know a couple weeks ago.
They'll have all the injuries on the defensive line, which is why they traded for Roy Robertson Harris this week.
Right. But that's starting to play itself out. Byron Murphy should be back soon. Leo Williams is back. two of their starting quarters, Tariq Woolen and Trey Brown, both out of practice on Wednesday. Woolen has not played in a while. He sounds like he's week to week. That leaves Devin Witherspoon as their only healthy cornerback.
Yes, Woolen and Witherspoon, really good numbers this year so far. Brown, bad numbers so far.
Okay. Well, if Woolen's not out there, then he's not out there, and that leaves Witherspoon to be the little Dutch boy. They also have offensive line issues. It's almost hard to figure out what's going on with their offensive line right now because it's the backup to the starter who's getting hurt.
Yeah, the right tackle situation is really poor. I had to do for ESPN what do teams want to trade for, the trade market, and I said for Seattle, right tackle.
Right tackle. It's hard to plug in a right tackle. You can trade for
in midseason. Yeah, it's tough, but that is what their need is.
Right. It's a banged up team. Metcalf is chirping a little bit. Like you said, I think Geno is just trying to get the ball deep. He's kind of spraying the ball, I think, a little bit to Metcalf, who, you know how it is with DK.
I do feel like one of these weeks Lockett is going to just have a big, they'll get the deep ball to Lockett, and Lockett will have a big game because Smith-Njigba requires more attention than he used to, and Metcalf requires a lot of attention, and I feel like Lockett's going to get free.
I feel like Lockett might be in the Travis Kelce, like we're starting to see the beginning of the end mode because we've heard very little from him.
Michael Allen Brewer says playing Atlanta can cure what ails you on the offensive line, and that is true. They have a very poor pass rush. Even with Matthew Judon this year.
Right, and he's going to play, but he's been on the injury list in midweek a lot, so he's kind of a little bit banged up, which has not helped.
The line is Falcons -3.
If you bet the Falcons, which I say you should never do, I say take the Falcons. I think they're the better team here. I was just on Vancouver radio. They're very pessimistic about the Seahawks there. And I agree. I think this is going to be the knockout blow for the Seahawks in terms of staying in this NFC wildcard conversation, which is vast and has all kinds of moving parts. I think the Falcons are the better team.
If you believe in the numbers, the DVOA numbers, you would take the Seahawks +3, but I kind of believe more in the just don't bet on Falcons games at all.
Falcons games. Life is better when you don't bet on Falcons games.
All right, let's go to 4 p.m. and the Super Bowl rematch.
Yay!
The number 4 Chiefs at the number 5 49ers. The 49ers offense, I think what's amazing about the 49ers offense is the trouble that they've had running the ball. Now, this is really interesting. They're 18th in run DVOA.
Okay.
And Jordan Mason limited with the shoulder injury, right? Yes. The Chiefs' defense, which has been bad against the run for years, is number 2 against the run so far this year. I don't know whether that's a small sample size or they've changed the way they play or it has to do with who their opponents have been.
Right.
Not as much like quality of their opponents, but like the style of their opponent. They've been able to play guys in the box or whatever. Their run defense has been actually very good this year. The 49ers run offense is struggling. Now, here is the really interesting stat. The ESPN run block win rate and adjusted line yards tend to agree with each other.
Okay.
But not here. The 49ers are second in adjusted line yards, but 31st in the run block win rate.
I don't know.
They're not getting lots of these long highlight runs.
Right.
So the adjusted line yards say it's good, but the run block win rates say it's bad.
Weird.
Hitchhiker's Pie says, where is ALY available now? It should be available with a subscription on FTN Fantasy.
Right.
Somewhere in the menu. You
download it, right? You download it now, right?
You can also download it. Yes. If you have a subscription, you can go to the downloads page and download the premium splits workbook every week. And that has the adjusted line yards numbers all in it if you can't find them on the site, but they are somewhere on the site as well.
When you look at the raw totals, the 49ers running game looks pretty good. The other thing that's odd, and I'm sure you've seen this, is the yak totals or the yak rates.
Are very low this year.
Right.
Which is why it's amazing that Purdy has such good stats.
Right.
Given that the yak that he's depended upon for the last couple of years is totally gone.
The offense looks different. When you really watch it, it looks like a much more conventional downfield offense, and Purdy has been doing a good job getting the ball downfield. And there's much less of this heavily scripted, let's get a yak opportunity. Of course, Christian's not there, so you're not doing that. But you're not doing it for Debo. You're not doing it as much for Kittle. You're not doing these things for Mason, who I'm sure can catch a little short pass. It looks like it's almost like a different philosophy right now.
Kyle Woods says we need Ayuk to show up this week.
Yeah.
Camden Cap says, is Christian McCaffrey's career over? hyperbole, I know, but it doesn't sound good. I would say that the pessimistic worst case scenario is that he misses this whole year.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that his career is over.
No. Although, I mean, we've seen guys never quite come back from that. Let's just not go all the way to that.
Yeah.
Let's not go away. And by the way, you talk about Juwan Jennings showed up on the injury report this week.
That's not good. Yes. Two more stats I'll give. First of all, the Chiefs have allowed 75 yards per game to tight ends. Okay. The Kittle prop is 52.5.
Oh, hit it. Oh, hit that.
And Brock Purdy has a 25% DVOA against the blitz, which is not as good as he was last year, but is still pretty good. And that is important when you're playing Steve Spagnuolo.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting. The certain, right, the Chiefs are missing, right? Juju Smith-Schuster came back from the dead. Like, I'm not seeing things last year. He was bad for the Patriots.
Remember, also, he had a good game. He also fumbled a ball, dropped a pass up into the air in the end zone to a Saints defender last week. So let's not act like he suddenly turned into Jerry Rice last week. He was still doing some Juju things.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of schemed up stuff going on. To get Juju open against the Saints.
The line is, this kind of surprises me a little bit. 49ers are favored by 1.5, which is basically the home field advantage.
Right.
Basically, it has these teams even. Gives the 49ers the home field advantage. I got to tell you, I'm feeling Chiefs.
It's odd because every time the Chiefs have played a weak opponent this season, you've been like, I think this is the game they trip. And here's one where they're facing a very strong opponent who's going to come out there with all the grudges in the world. And, is in a little bit of a, they can't.
More of a must win, certainly, than they're not in a must win, but they're in a more of a must win.
They're in a more of a must win. The Chiefs, like, we took our first loss and we only have a 3-game lead in the division or whatever it's going to turn out to be. And now you're feeling the Chiefs. I'm feeling the Niners on this one. I think that they're going to come out smoking. I think that I don't know how much smoke and mirrors Andy Reid has right now to get through this against an opponent of this quality. So I'm thinking 49ers.
It is a good defense, obviously. It is a good pass rush. And Chiefs, watch for the 49ers making a big special teams mistake. Their special teams are pretty lousy this year.
Yes.
All right, so let's go to the night game. Talk a little bit about the night game. The Packers. Jets.
I do it too. Against the Seahawks, right? The Seahawks, because Russell Wilson
against the Steelers. Well, there's no Russell Wilson doesn't have any of his old buddies, so they're still the Steelers.
Right.
Jets at Steelers. Now, Jets are 21st right now in DVOA. Steelers are 16th, but our preseason, Dave-wise, they're much more even because the Steelers we had a little lower, and the Jets we had a little bit of higher. The Jets are still very poor rushing this year. Not Breece Hall's fault, but they're not getting the push on the offensive line that they thought they were going to get. The Steelers are 5th in run defense. The Jets need to pass more, but the Steelers are poor against running backs in the passing game, so this could be a good Breece Hall catching passes game.
Interesting. I wonder which offensive coordinator will find these stats and exploit them. Which decision maker for the Jets will figure this out.
Right. Obviously passes to the running back are often dump offs. They're not necessarily planned, but the Jets run a lot of planned routes to Breece.
Right. There should be a lot of things in that system to get the ball in the flat on purpose to Hall, maybe with a blocker in front of him. Well, what's your take on Davante Adams? It's almost certain he's going to play. What impact?
I think Davante Adams is still a pretty good player. I think that if I was a defense that had a cornerback who followed the number one receiver on the other team, I would still put that cornerback on Garrett Wilson.
Really?
I think Garrett Wilson is better than Davante Adams at this. They're both very good.
Right.
Unless your thought is that Rodgers is going to be so simpatico with Adams that he's going to just find him more. But think about it. He's practiced a lot more with Wilson over the last year and a half than he has not last year, over the last few months. He's practiced a lot more with Wilson than he has with Adams. I think this was a good, I think if the Jets want to win this year, I mean, yes, they're 2-4, but if they want to win this year, I think this was a good trade.
Yeah.
I think this was a good trade for both teams. Talking about the trades this week, the Cooper trade is interesting because the ESPN receiver tracking metrics that are based on next gen stats have Cooper as the worst receiver in the league this year.
And are you basing that on getting open and things like that?
Yeah, it's not based on quarterback play. But I mean, what I said to somebody on Twitter was I would be really curious to go back and if we had those stats for Randy Moss in Oakland, like what would it have said? Like there's a I don't care anymore possibility here with Cooper where he suddenly and Adams's numbers have declined, but Adams's numbers in the receiver tracking metrics look much more like an age-related decline. They go down a little bit each year, and they're not anywhere near the bottom of the league at this point. They're just not as good as they were 3 years ago.
And he hasn't dealt with that terrible a quarterbacking situation. Even when you got these young guys and O'Connell and everything out there, the ball kind of gets in your general direction. I watched a bunch of Cooper yesterday, and it's hysterical. It's hilarious. He's running drag routes, and the ball's up here behind him on a shallow drag that goes about 20 feet in the air. With deep passes, the ball's not even coming anywhere near him. Now, I agree. On some of these, it looks like I didn't see you get separation on that. And that's a Commander's cornerback. Like that's one of those guys that like you should be able to separate on that. But I don't know if he has to do a lot of that right now because they're not looking for somebody to save their receiving core. They're looking at somebody to be better than Mac Hollins.
Right.
Who can draw more coverage than Mac Hollins, who is more reliable in the corner of the end zone than Valdez-Scantling was. And I see that for Cooper. Whereas Adams, it's like now we have even more receivers. It doesn't change the fact that running game's in trouble. Offensive line isn't great. Quarterback can't move anymore. There's no coordinator to say, hey, walk up blitzes. We don't have a solution to that. Let's do something.
Also, run defense has not been good this year.
Right.
For the Jets. And their cornerbacks are having off seasons. Here's interesting. This is really interesting. Last year, all three Jets cornerbacks were phenomenal in the coverage DVOA.
Okay.
This year, Michael Carter has been injured.
Yes.
And DJ Reed and Ahmad Gardner come out as slightly below average so far.
Interesting. Now Reed's hurt too.
And now Reed is hurt too. Now, I mean, I talk a lot about cornerback stats being inconsistent. Gardner was really good in this stat for 2 straight years.
Yes.
I'm sure he's going to be better than this when we get to the end of the season.
Right.
But it is interesting that he's not playing at the Ahmad Gardner level so far.
Right. And now it becomes a situation where if Reed and Carter are both out, it looks like
they really need him to play at that level.
And also he's the little Dutch boy again. And it's like, well, maybe you shut down the number one and we're in trouble. They're placing a team whose number one is a rather checked out George Pickens right now.
Yes. And I don't, Fields has been slightly below average this year in passing DVOA, which means when you add in his rushing value, he's been probably an average NFL starter. That is a huge improvement. It is much better than I could have expected.
Right.
Can Wilson really be better than that? Like I was all like, Fields has been terrible for 3 years. It's unbelievably rare to find a guy who's terrible for 3 years who suddenly becomes good in the 4th year. But what he has become is average in the 4th year.
Right.
And I don't know if Wilson gives them anything better than that.
Right. You can get a guy who's bad for a couple of years and then has these sort of Daniel Jones, like, oh, in this structured offense, I can do these things and help you with my life.
This is better than Daniel Jones.
This is Daniel Jones in 2022?
Average, yeah. Daniel Jones is more like the 22nd best quarterback in the league. And Fields
but I meant the year that they made the playoffs.
Yeah, like Daniel Jones.
In this rigid structure, we can do these things, et cetera, et cetera. He can do that kind of thing. Yeah, you're putting Wilson out there. Also, Najee Harris is on the injury report with a rib injury. Patterson is also out, I believe. Rookie center Zach Frazier, who's been starting for several weeks, is out, officially out. Ryan McCormick will start in his place. There are already a couple of offensive linemen on IR. So you're putting Russell Wilson out there behind the banged-up version of the banged-up offensive line with only one wide receiver who's a kind of a flaky individual with the number one running back out, with Warren in and out because of injuries, and the number 3 running back out.
So he's like an old Drake May. My number one running back is out. I don't really have receivers. My offensive line is in shambles. Everybody is in injuries.
May's on the injury report.
The difference is that I'm much older.
I'm much older, right? Right. And you don't care what happens to me anymore because you're kind of got done with me 3 years ago. And also, they get smaller, Drake May. Let's point that out.
Yeah. Hitchhiker's Pie points out that Russell was better than Fields last year on running value, not just on passing value, lower volume.
Fumbles.
But
fumbles.
Yeah, because Fields fumbles, I bet.
I'm guessing.
I mean, Fields has just, I just don't know where Russell Wilson is better than what Fields has been this year. So the question is like, do you believe in what Fields has been through 6 games?
Right. Why?
Or do you believe in what Fields was in the first 3 years, knowing that Chicago was a burning pit of hell?
Yes, and factoring in that this isn't some hotshot rookie on the bench or whatever. This is somebody who's limited to this point in his career. Why now? Why coming off a win? Why coming off a pretty convincing win overall? Why against this opponent? Unless you're trying to do the old Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers rivalry from like 6 years ago and making that a thing. I don't understand the decision.
What's also interesting about it is Tomlin may be the coach I trust in the league the most when it comes to locker room management.
Yeah.
And given the way teammates feel about Fields and you wonder how they feel about Fields, because we know teammates in the past have not liked Will. Like, what's the locker room management impact of making this change? I mean, again, these are those intangibles that I always talk about us not being able to measure, but that they do exist. Like, do the Steelers like Russell? Do they like Field? Like, how do the other players? What about Pickens being checked out? Does this make Pickens less checked out? Like, I do not know the answer to these questions.
No, and my theory is that Arthur Smith also knows what they're running right now for Fields, and saying this is the package that we've been running for the last couple of weeks. He might be looking at this and say we're running out of stuff. Like, this is going to get figured out. These are the limits. These are the limits of option routes and things like that. That could be a factor as well. It's like, we've been propping up Fields now for 6 weeks. If we keep doing this, it's going to get exposed. That's another thing that I think might be happening in the background. But again, that's just speculation.
All right. That does it for our Week 7 preview, folks. Thank you so much.
We're not making a pick. We're not making a pick.
Oh, we didn't make a pick. You're right. Jets -1.5.
I'm taking the Jets because of the turmoil right now and the injuries on the Steelers side.
Yeah, I'm going Jets too.
All
I
right.
think, and if you believe in the, who's more desperate, it's Jets all the way.
Exactly. That's the desperation team right now.
All right. Thank you all for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe to the show. We will be back Monday at 11 a.m. to wrap up Week 7 and preview a really good surprisingly good Baltimore-Tampa Bay game. And then another game that will only be on ESPN+.
Wait, what? What?
The Cardinals-Chargers is on ESPN+ only.
So you have to pay to see Justin Herbert, folks.
I don't pay to see James Conner. I
completely spaced on that. Holy cow. Okay. All right.
All right. We'll see you all Monday morning at 11 a.m. Enjoy Week 7, everybody.
Oh, got it.